that's a little bit about me for those of you who don't know who I am. Okay, so I want to make a quick disclaimer before we get started. All right, so the first thing I want to point out is that these are my observations and experiences. Okay, so I taught the license waiver course, as a coach for 10 years. I've been operating my own school, the Cornering Confidence Program, and so I kind of had been having a foot in both worlds, and so that's sort of where that's how I bring these experiences and my observations. Also, I 100% back the basic training license waiver courses, and I'll refer to basic training mostly in this presentation as the license waiver courses, because we know there's several different curriculums, and I'm not going to name any curriculums. I'm going to make assumptions that you can, they're broad, but specific as well to certain ones that I've been trained in. Now, I'm not making a case against the basic courses. There's a lot they get right. They're really good at preparing writers with little to no experience, and basic training can take a writer very far. All right, so if you want to be a very conservative writer, you can go very, very far on basic skills and enjoy motorcycling just as much as someone who likes to go a little faster. I also have found that the cognitive skill development and traffic management is very hard to beat outside the waiver courses. I mean, they really can handle a lot of those mental things and how to interpret traffic probably better than anybody. And that's probably why you don't see a whole lot of additional training in traffic management and those kind of things. Now, why this topic? Well, I'm interested in it. Okay, so I have this inquisitive mind, and in my experience, in my experience coaching track days and coaching tours, many experienced writers simply recite and perpetuate misconceptions perhaps learned in the waiver courses far into the future. They don't do it on purpose. It's just that there's a tendency to repeat for many years what was taught in a basic course. Now, where I see problems are mostly with the next level cornering content and techniques beyond the parking lot, because we know there's a trick here. We have to teach people who don't know what they're doing not to hurt themselves today while we're learning, and then once they leave us, some things just aren't as applicable anymore. And so it's the next level cornering content and techniques that we're looking for, and they're not being learned and potentially holding writers back once they leave the course. Also, waiver course coaches may want to understand their students better because they may be bringing knowledge or questions to their courses. And you got to understand, in today's day and age, there's a lot of YouTubers, and there's a lot of great books out there, awesome podcasts, and they talk about things. And if you as a coach just stop, with what's in the basic waiver courses and say, well, this is going to take you forever into the future, you just may not be understanding where the students are coming from. And of course, I want to make a quick note about advanced concepts in waiver course materials. You certainly can find inclusions of advanced techniques in waiver course materials. Now, when I was recertified in 2017 for the latest curriculum, there were many things in the student handbook that were really advanced and improved. And I remember being surprised by that. And the writer coach basically was saying, well, this might be the only class they ever take, and that the book itself is kind of supposed to be a standalone resource. And while they do mention some of the advanced things I'll talk about in the course materials, it's mostly in the workbooks, the student workbooks. When the students are actually out riding in the parking lot, these things are basically absent. So those are my just overall disclaimers ahead of time. Now, with the I have primary variations and secondary variations, and we'll we'll see, how far we can get with this, because I really want to have more of a discussion than simply, just recite all this to you. And so I have 4 primary variations, and then in between each one, we can maybe have a quick discussion, or questions or comments. And then if we get to the secondary variations, we can do that tonight. Now, somebody has to mute. I hear sniffles and things like that. So if somebody could just check to make sure they're Microsoft, remember, if you want to talk, great. Hold down the space bar, say what you need to. Okay, so the first, I'm going to read the 4 first, and then I'll take them one at a time. So the first one has to do with narrow cornering focus. Now, I'm not saying that there's not enough cornering materials or training in the waiver courses. I'm just saying that what is taught has a narrow focus. Okay. The front braking technique, and more specifically, the hand placement and how to use the brake. That is a major variation. Then entry speed is another big one. So we're going to talk about entry speed. This is crucial, really, to what separates the parking lot waiver courses from next step, next day training, whatever you want to do. And of course, braking and curves. All right. So we've all heard, many, many times, never use your brakes in a turn. And we've said it many times as coaches, if you're coaches out there. So this is probably one of the big boys. Okay. This is where this is the last one of the primary sort of variations that I have here. So we already talked about, the hand placement. Okay. The using of, or entry speed coming in. So now this kind of talks about the using the brakes in the curve. And so if you really want to get somebody riled up, hang around with a couple of, coaches and say, well, you can use your brakes in the turn. They'll probably start to, shake and say, well, no, you can't do that, right? It's very dangerous. And it could be. Okay. So I'm not saying braking in curves is like a walk in the park here. Okay. It's very important that you know what you're doing. But right in the curriculum of the waiver course, it will say that slowing in a curve is considered an error in judgment and must be corrected. Again, maybe this relates to a specific exercise, but this is, if you have, let's say, 15 exercises and you spend one of them just hammering this in, it could have a lasting effect. And most riders are not going to get additional training. And so they're going to have this in their head, never break in a curve. And oh, by the way, they're also cornering with their hand in a fist. So it's sort of a horrific thought for them to be leaned over, hand curled on the grip, and then reach and squeeze for the brake, because of, the suspension's a disaster by then. The reaction time isn't there. And so it's easy for people to think in their minds, hell no, I'm not braking in a curve, because that particular scenario is kind of a frightening scenario. Now, on this one particular range exercise actually says it should not end if the riders are braking past the entry point. All right. Again, what the purpose of the exercise is irrelevant, because we know that it's for new riders, right? So it's just that what will be remembered after, because these people typically do not go for more training. So what changes? Well, carrying the brakes into the curve or slowing into the curve is common. Okay, when people leave. Okay, and they may not know it, but just like we talked about with Myron, they're going into a 25-mile-an-hour turn. They are not rolling on the throttle if they're going in at 45. Okay, maybe there's someone who really leans and really has good tires and things like that, sticky tires. But most of us are, whether we think we are or not. And I challenge people out there, if they can ride these days, go to a twisty section and ride at your normal pace. If you go faster, you're not rolling on the throttle until probably closer to the corner apex, okay, the middle of the corner, when you're, the first half of the turn is over, because you know from your experience that if you add that throttle more than just maintenance throttle, then it could lead to trouble, okay? Now, trail braking would be an example of this. I'm not getting into too much detail on that tonight just because I'm pointing out certain things, and that's a whole thing in and of itself. Now, just to complicate things even further, when it talked about the curriculum, I have a KTM manual here. Right from the manual, it says, now their KTM is ready to race. That's their thing. I mean, would you say their motorcycles are pretty fast? It says right in their manual, braking should always be completed before you go into a bend. Okay. Now, always completed. So that kind of seems like lawyer talk to me, because there's no way you could do that on their motorcycles. I mean, if you're riding them at the pace that they build them for, okay? So we know that we have to continue to slow past the entry of a turn. Now, if I go back to this, when you're in the course, you have a slower parking lot with a coach to control your speed. When you leave the course, the coach isn't there, and the speeds pick up. And so I think of that, 20 something, okay, who's riding with his buddies on sport bikes or something, a week or two after he took the course. What's going through his head or her head, even, because we're getting a lot of female riders now, right? So when they leave the basic course, are they trying to keep up with their friends, but they say, look, I can't use my brakes in the turn. I got to hold on for dear life through this turn, which brings me to another thing coming up in a minute. But let's see. So, and then of course, I put this down at the bottom because this is like a secondary thing. And if you took the advanced rider course or a waiver course, organization secondary levels, they do teach you how to apply brakes leaned over a little bit and how to maybe do direction changes while you're actually in a lean. And I would just say that braking doesn't have to be using your brakes. Braking can be rolling off the throttle. It could be continuing through a turn with your throttle closed as well. It's slowing in curves. All right. And that really could save people's bacon, if they're if they're running a little bit wide, and they're not really thinking about what they're doing with their throttle hand. Now, any questions or comments about the braking in the curves, or questions about anything I've said or comments? Now, what makes this all work, ladies and gentlemen, is the brake throttle transition, what I call the brake throttle transition default hand position, because we can then get the timing right. Remember, we're going to do this at the slowest mile per hour, basically, in the turn, wherever that is, the beginning, middle, or end. We're going to finish our transition from brake to throttle as we leave, as we exit. All right, and that's what changes if you're riding at a spirited pace and you want control. I think originally I titled this, instead of braking in curves and in entry speed, I had corner speed control, because the way it's taught in the waiver courses, you have to set your speed ahead of time. There is no second chance. You set it ahead of time and forget it. Set it and forget it. Okay, because you can't make any decisions after you commit. What changes after you leave the course is you don't want to commit at the beginning of the turn if you're not sure about a lot of things about the turn, like, are you going to make the turn, and is there something in the turn? And so those are some of the things. And I would say that slowing and braking in a curve, they're important skills if you're going to do this, even just recreationally, not even at a sport touring pace, because stuff happens.